So in this video, might be a bit of a longer one, this, might do it in two parts, we'll see how it goes. I'll talk about the AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and NA, which I think is Narcotics Anonymous. I've not been to either one of them. So anything I'm about to say, to keep it all politically correct, I've not taken any of them. Yeah, and I've got the Buddha to prove it. So when we're talking about drink and drugs, and the damage that they do, but also leading into what people call addiction. So the AA, in my opinion, from what I've heard about other people that have attended those type of meetings, is that they tell you that you're an addict for life. Now, if that's true, the first thing I'll say is there's no such thing as addiction, so it can't be true. But telling someone that they are an addict for life is one way of getting them to come back for repeat business. So, you know, in economics, you've got a supply and you've got a demand. So the supply is the person that thinks that they are an addict. They're told that they are an addict. And then there's a demand for the centre to be open to house these people, and keep telling them lies. Yes, you're an addict, sir. You always will be. You need to keep coming to these meetings, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that is a fantastic business plan, if I've ever heard of one. It taps right into the subconscious of an individual that is not thinking straight and doesn't have the clarity of mind to see exactly what's going on right under their nose, while you've got these potential covert operators running this business. Now, I'm looking at it in the negative sense here. I mean, if you were going to be a little bit more positive about it, then you'd say that the people that run the AA centre actually are delusional enough to believe that there's such a thing as addiction, and that they're delusional enough to believe that their services are going to be required as a result of that long term. So anyone that ever has a drink past their lips, that tends to start liking it a little bit, then they're going to consume a lot of alcohol, become dysfunctional, potentially not be able to go to work, and then obviously that starts to create disorder in that individual's life. So yeah, the centre's there to house people that identify as being addicts, and they're brainwashed in that way, to my understanding, that they're told that they're addicts. So much so that they've got to stand up and admit it to other people in the circle of chairs. Hi, my name's whatever, I'm an addict. I mean, I've seen that on the telly. I don't know whether that happens in these centres. It must have come from somewhere, the idea, and it's believable. Now, if it goes on, which I don't know whether it does, but I'm running on the premise that it does, then, like I said, it's nothing more than a business that is operating, preying on people's vulnerabilities. So I'll explain why there's no such thing as addiction. It is a psychological trick in the mind, and people get it confused with dependency. So the difference between addiction and dependency is addiction is a mental pattern of behaviour, and dependency is where if you don't have whatever it is, the drink or the drug, because your body has become dependent on that substance, then you get horrendous withdrawal symptoms. And if you're not treated correctly, in some cases with certain drugs, you can actually die from the withdrawal symptoms, what it does to your body. So dependency exists. The body does depend on certain drugs if you take them for long enough. However, addiction is a want, not a need. So the body needs that drug in order to function when it comes to dependency. But when it comes to what people call addiction, it's the individual wants to take that drug again. If they go without it, it's not going to be life-threatening. However, they want it. And so that's what people label as an addiction. Now, all that's going on is anyone that's, let's just say addiction exists for a minute, which it doesn't, but let's just say it does, just so I can have the conversation. So you've got someone that identifies as an addict, and the idea behind addiction is that the individual can't help themselves a lot of the time. You know, you do get some people that self-help and end up kicking habits, but for the vast majority of people that identify themselves as an addict, they find that they can't cope and need an intervention. So that means they need a third party to tell them what they can and can't do, and essentially to treat them like a baby. So where does that behaviour come from? And it's going to be no surprise that it comes from low self-esteem. It can be trauma that creates the internal suffering in an individual. It's always a movement of mind that creates internal suffering. And so emotionally, that individual will then suffer. And what they'll want to do is alleviate those symptoms because they don't like feeling bad. So what they'll do is they'll turn to what most people would call a quick fix. So a drug is a quick remedy. I can have a couple of cans of lager or a line of flake or whatever you're into, cannabis, have a smoke, do whatever you find that relaxes you, whatever you feel suits you best, which none of them do, but there's normally one drug in particular that someone will gravitate to. So they'll either be cannabis, or it'll be cocaine, or it'll be crack, or it'll be heroin, or whatever it is. Or they'll have their vice. Could be alcohol. So it all comes from not feeling good, not feeling good enough. So there's always a comparison to what I have at the moment and what I want. And what I have isn't what I want, so I'm going to go out and get some drugs because I know historically through memory that made me feel better. So a lot of people will call that self-medication. It doesn't ever fix anything, it just damages you physically and psychologically. And the irony behind it is a lot of these things are made up in the individual's mind that they're trying to escape from. So not always the case, but in a lot of cases it will be just made up. So let's just say somebody's suffering with depression, they don't feel very good, they haven't got a job, they're not happy in their life, they haven't got a girlfriend or a boyfriend, things aren't going their way, because that's essentially how depression develops. It's an unrealistic expectation that the individual has, and they're not getting whatever it is that they want. So they develop that mental habit of hating on things all the time, hating the circumstances they find themselves in, hating the fact that they haven't got a job, hating the fact they haven't got a girlfriend. They start feeling worthless as a result of it. Low self-esteem comes in then. So the mental health starts depreciating rapidly. Some people will suffer with anxiety as well. But it's always mental hindrances that create suffering. They're all forms of craving. So they're wanting things to be different than they actually are in reality. As a result, that individual's going to suffer. What they'll do then is they'll pick up, just say lager, for example, drink that down. That'll do me nicely. That's making me feel better. Not concerned about the dysfunction that's going to come from it afterwards. They're more in the moment. This is what I need to do to make myself feel better. It's the only thing I know how to do, because they don't know how to deal with their own internal thoughts. They don't know how to navigate their own mind to understand what it is that's causing the suffering. And that's no surprise, because it's not simple, but that's what's going on. So yeah, they'll self-medicate, they'll take the drug, they'll then find themselves in a situation where they have the come down and the withdrawals from whatever it is that they're taking. Add to that the fact that the reason why they took it in the first place or drank it in the first place, whatever the case may be, and you've got a recipe for disaster there for physical and mental suffering to be exacerbated. So then they feel a need to take that again, whatever it is that they're taking, and they get stuck in a cycle. So that cycle is what people call addiction. However, it's not an addiction, because addiction, the definition of addiction in my mind at least, is that it's something that an individual does and they can't help themselves, and it's destructive. So drinking alcohol all the time, knowing that it's destructive, knowing that it's going to have negative effects on you, but ignoring that and still going ahead and drinking because you want to escape the feelings that you're experiencing when you're not intoxicated. It is a psychological process that an individual goes through to escape suffering, but it's not something that can't be dealt with. So if anybody is addicted, or dependent is more accurate, on alcohol or heroin or any drugs that would have any withdrawal symptoms, then obviously you're going to have to seek medical intervention if you're trying to come off those things. But a lot of the time, things like cocaine and cannabis and speed, amphetamines, MDMA, mushrooms, all those type of things, LSD, to my knowledge, they're not physically addictive. In other words, you don't become dependent on those things. You just want to take them because you don't feel very good, or you feel that your life's not good enough as it is. And so you develop a craving. So that craving is to feel better. You take the drug, you feel worse afterwards. Then you've got to then recover from the side effects of the drink or the drugs before you can then contemplate looking at what the original issue was, perceived problem that you had in your mind, or problem, whichever the case may be. And so people then go to places like the AA, suffering with their self-esteem, saying, I can't cope, I think I'm an addict, I can't come off this particular drug, whatever it is. Now, putting aside dependency and just looking at the addiction side of things, that I've said is already only psychological, it's how to deal with that. Now, it is born from low self-esteem, so the individual that's suffering with low self-esteem or doubting themselves all the time, they're already telling themselves the story that they don't know what to do in order to stop taking whatever it is they're taking. Now, it's pretty basic stuff when you think about it. That you're suffering, you don't feel good, you want to feel better, so you take something that you know that will make you feel better, which is a quick fix, rather than stop taking whatever it is that's making you feel better and momentarily, whether it's alcohol or a drug, and addressing exactly why you're doing it in the first place. It's because I feel this way, it's because I feel that way. So that individual has no choice but either to carry on down that destructive route and probably end up killing themselves or somebody else through taking whatever drugs that they're taking, or drink, or they can choose not to do that, to know that it's not going to work long term and that it's only a short term fix, to recognise there's no such thing as addiction, because that's very important for somebody to recognise there's no such thing as addiction. There is dependency, there is no such thing as addiction. I mean, I could do a video on this in more detail about how it works in the mind, because it can be quite complex, just talking it out loud and getting people to understand it. And I think if you see it visually on a whiteboard, for example, it'd be a lot clearer how these things come into being. But essentially, for now, there's no such thing as addiction. There's such thing as dependency. People get confused. You don't need the AA. And if you do go to the AA and they tell you you are an addict, right, then I'm awfully sorry to tell you, but I completely disagree with what they're telling you. And you're going to end up making yourself sicker by getting involved with people that are telling you that story. So, like any issue with low self-esteem or doubting, the last thing you need is someone to externally validate what you believe about yourself that is true. So that will keep you in forever thinking that way, because infinity is painful. So if you are then convinced that you are an addict, and you always will be one, you are going to be stuck with that for the rest of your life. Because I can show you how the little prison system works in the mind and how you get locked into it and why infinity is painful. But at the minute, it's safe to say that there is no such thing as addiction. So if anyone's told you you're an addict, or you keep telling yourself you're one, then what you want to do in order to recover from that way of thinking is reverse it. So it's about looking at the facts. So what is addiction? All right, okay, it's a behavioural thing. So it's a want and not a need. That's important. You want the drug, you don't need it. Why do you want it? And you look at the reason why. It's because I don't feel great when I don't have it and I want to feel better. Okay, and you want a quick fix. That's important to identify. So the longer road isn't something that you want to go down, and there's a reason behind that, because this sort of mental behaviour is a derivative of low self-esteem. So you want to conserve energy. What the individual doesn't understand when they're doing this is that they're actually using more energy. So there's a misunderstanding there that by drinking the alcohol or taking the drugs, that's an easier route. It certainly isn't. It's a much harder route than actually putting that stuff down, getting well, getting clean and dry from it, and just looking at your psychology, going, oh yeah, right, okay. When you realise what you've been doing, you think, what an idiot, you know what I mean? So, yeah, there's nothing wrong with you. You are not an addict. There is no such thing as addiction. If you're interested in learning more about that, I'll do a video in more detail. This one's coming up to the 20-minute mark now, so I'm going to call it a day there, because it's quite a long one. And as my videos aren't scripted, I might find myself babbling a little bit and going all around the houses, as I've already explained before. It's kind of part of the process. But if you've got any questions, then put them in the comments or subscribe to my channel. And if I can get some feedback off you guys, then that'd be better, because I'd know exactly what you want to know about. Because at the moment, I'm just offering material that I think might be of use. So that's it for now, and I'll speak to you next time.